Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to EnterVironment from TEDxGöteborg. My name is Chris Granger, and we're here to talk about how entertainment and the environment play nicely together. How do entertainment and the environment live in harmony, really? And at what points do these two concepts meet as we as humans strive for happiness and bring pleasure into our lives? Today's world requires a consciousness of the environment, and it also requires us to maintain a degree of mental health and reach for our happiness from an individual level and from a community level. EnterVironment is the collision of our pursuit of individual pleasure with our collective consciousness. It is the exploration of the management of our own desires and living in a way that allows us to think about our community, think about us as a human society, and think about our planet. So today we're going through two panel discussions, and I'm so excited about this first panel, and I really feel as though it makes a lot of sense to have the panel introduce themselves. So we can probably just start with David. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I think my role here is that I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Icebug, a Swedish footwear company, and we do a lot of work in this field. Apart from that, I'm also a father of three and a great lover of the outdoors, running in the forest, biking, skiing in the wintertime.
Thank you. And Tilda?
Yeah, I'm the founder of Cutlery, the mixed edible cutlery. So I work with sustainability in my everyday life, which is really fun. And I also love to build startups too. So I'm here to give my perspective. And I'm also a vegan, if that's worth mentioning.
I think so.
Yeah.
And Eleanor?
Amazing. It's great to be here. I think we'll have a great time. So my name is Eleanor and I am a student. I have been studying economy and sustainability, and right now I'm studying entrepreneurship at Salon. And I love sustainability. I think it's really interesting. So I take every chance I can get to work part-time with that. And I especially love working with measuring sustainability.
Nice.
That's amazing.
So this conversation is about entrepreneurship, business, and greenwashing. It's a guide for businesses to think about designing and communicating environmental goals, both from the perspective of creating businesses with environmental sustainability at the core, and also from the perspective of transforming business. So we're going to start with Eleanor. We're going to start with Eleanor, who is a master's student at Chalmers, specializing in sustainable entrepreneurship. And I think where I'd like to start, Eleanor, what is sustainable entrepreneurship and why is it important?
That's a great question. And I absolutely think that depending on who you ask, you'll get different answers. So if you ask me, I think that I would say that sustainable entrepreneurship is connected to the definition of sustainability. If we go all the way back to the beginning, so then sustainability is all about doing what we are doing right now and doing what we want to do and doing what we desire to do, but without compromising on the future generations. So, I mean, I guess that all of us have had a great day today, and that the future generations should have the possibility to have great days they as well. And this definition, I think it was first written in a report written for the UN in 1987. So for me, born in 97, that was a while ago. And then if we connect this to entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurs then have the possibility and the ability to come up with the solutions that is needed for us to do exactly what we want to do and what we feel like doing, but without compromising on future generations. So I would say something like that.
Okay. So there's a lot of talk both in the academic space and in business space about greenwashing in sustainability and communicating with consumers. What is greenwashing? Can you give us some insight on that and tell us a little bit about how maybe we can avoid greenwashing, and also why should we care?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I mean, I think that many of us meet greenwashing at more times than we might realize. That we see it more often than we react on. I don't know that Maria Soxbo once said, she is a sustainability journalist and she was actually featured on Nyhetsmorgon a while ago. She said that greenwashing is when sustainability marketing goes wrong. So let's say that we, for an example, have a company and they are marketing their new sustainable products. We have a new sustainable clothing collection, or we have a new sustainable kitchen tool, or whatever kind of product that they are marketing. Then if we think about it, then they actually say that this product is sustainable, but they have decided that for themselves. So then we come to the issue of transparency. We as consumers, we haven't been given the data or the information that we need for us to take this decision on our own. If the companies then instead, to avoid greenwashing, say that we have this new product that is produced with 5% less water, or we have this new product that is produced by 50% more recycled material, or something like that, then they basically say the same thing, but we as consumers have all the data and information needed for us to, on our own, make that decision. So greenwashing is important because sometimes companies and other organizations decide something for you without giving you the information for you to decide that on your own.
Yeah, so that we really need some greater degrees of transparency.
Yeah.
Because, you mentioned a UN report in 1987, but a UN report that came out in 2021, this year, speaks about us as humans being responsible for the demise of the climate in a very major way. So it's so important for us to think about our sustainability, our sustainability mindedness as individuals and as businesses, and how we build businesses. So I want to ask you the question, from your understanding, are there frameworks for sustainable businesses that entrepreneurs and business leaders can find and adopt that would help sort of provide a roadmap for them to create sustainability? Can you give insight into any that you might be familiar with?
Absolutely. There are a tremendous amount of tools, but they are quite challenging to find sometimes. But there is one tool that I really like that is called the Carbon Law, and that is inspired by Moore's Law. You know, the law that says that the speed of computers is doubling every second year, I think, if I'm not mistaken right now. So the computers are becoming faster and faster and faster. And the Carbon Law says that, of course, that we should not emit our emissions faster and faster and faster, but that we should lower them faster and faster and faster, so that we should lower our emissions exponentially. And the Carbon Law says that we should do this at a rate of halving our emissions every 10th year. So if we halve our emissions every 10th year, like the Carbon Law says, then we will be really close to zero emissions in 2050. And that is what we need to do according to the Paris Agreement and all those scientists out there telling us what to do. And it is even said that richer countries, for example, like Sweden, and big corporations, that they should do the double carbon law, that they should halve their emissions in 5 years. So then we can connect this to sustainable entrepreneurship like we talked about before, and that maybe these entrepreneurs are a group of people that come up with the solutions that halve our emissions in 10 years.
I'm blown away by this. What do you think really needs to be considered from the perspective of an entrepreneur who's thinking about creating business, but also from the perspective of an executive who's in an organization wanting to transform their business? What are some of the important takeaways that you think really need to be considered?
Absolutely. And I mean, the simple answer there maybe is that maybe there is no difference between an executive and an entrepreneur. I mean, either you are doing something sustainable or you are not doing something sustainable. But then the more difficult answer can maybe be that you can use the situation that you are in. If you're an entrepreneur, you are maybe not having a boss telling you what to do, since you maybe are the boss. And you're maybe having a bit more free creative space, and maybe you can decide a little bit more of your own time. And then maybe you have the ability to come up with great solutions. And then maybe an executive in a big company, then that person maybe have the resources and the money and the network needed to spread the great ideas. I talked about the carbon law, and I have written a book, or no, I have not written a book, I have read a book by a woman named Rebecca Karlsson. I really recommend it. It is about exponential tech and sustainability.
Rebecca Karlsson?
Rebecca Karlsson, yes. The book is in gold, it's really amazing. And she talked about the carbon law, and that there are 2 ways that you can kind of use the carbon law. So either you can come up with the solutions that are halving our emissions every 10th year, and then it is maybe better suited for you to be an entrepreneur and coming up with all these great solutions. Or you can halve your emissions in every 10th year by spreading the great solutions that are already out there. And then maybe that mission is maybe more suited for an executive. So we can share and do what we think is best for us to do.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tilda, for sort of laying that foundation
Eleanor.
for this. Sorry, Eleanor.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, for laying that foundation for this conversation. So now, Tilda, my apologies. Tilda. So Tilda is a 20-year-old sustainable entrepreneur with a business called Cutlery that will be featured on Dragon's Den in Sweden this upcoming season. It's exciting.
Yeah, really exciting.
How does that feel?
It feels scary to see it. Yeah, but also really exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah,
All right,
thank
well,
you.
Tilda, a question for you. What motivated you to create a brand of edible, disposable cutlery?
It's actually really fun because I've said since I was 10 years old that I want to work with sustainability. Or I didn't really know the term sustainability when I was 10 years old, but I've always said to all my cousins and all my family that in the future I want to make the world better in some way. And I didn't know that sustainability was the thing, but it was just so clear for me when I found this concept of edible cutlery that is a big thing in Asia. I was just blown away why we don't have that in Sweden. So I was like, of course I'm going to make my own recipe. And in that way, I actually was able to do something that can make the future brighter, which I hope at least. And so that's the way I got it.
Okay.
I actually got inspiration from an Asian entrepreneur.
Oh, nice. So let's talk about your customers. How do you define your typical customer, and how do you think about increasing that base of customers?
My customer is the person that don't mind spending some extra money on making sustainable choices. So it can be a person that maybe, just like I do, when they're in the store, maybe they spend some extra money on buying the vegan meat instead. Or they spend some extra money on buying the vegan alternative to milk, for example. Or they just take that extra mile just to make some better choices for the environment.
Yeah.
And that's why I can be able to sell my spoons for a little bit more than the than the wooden spoons are sold for. Because my customers are paying for both the experience of eating the spoons, because it's a fun thing, but also for the sustainability of it.
Yeah, so it's customers that love sustainability to the point that they are willing to spend that extra, go the extra mile to be able to be part of a movement of sustainability. But how do you increase that customer base? How do you speak to more customers? Where do you find them?
I think that we find them in different channels. Like, I work a lot with social media because that's where a lot of the young people not live, but they hang out there a lot. And I think that we can just teach people. I do a lot of teaching at Gothenburg University in entrepreneurship, and then we also, of course, talk about sustainable entrepreneurship. And when we teach people that sustainability is actually the future, then that base of people that will buy sustainable products will automatically be bigger.
They connect with it immediately.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, what are some of the guiding principles, the principles that guide your innovation and your business creation? What is the bloodline that runs through your company in that regard?
It's that it's going to be able, I have to be able to run this in 10 years and hopefully in 20 years too. So it's that I make all the best choices that I can from my ability from now and as long as I can. So I always try to think the extra mile while making decisions, so it's the right decision from the beginning. But sometimes you're wrong too, of course. But you always try to do the best, both for my future employees and for the environment too.
So I'm going to call you a sustainability superhero.
Thank you. That makes me happy to hear.
What gives you energy? What makes you optimistic about the future in terms of the greenery of the future?
As I mentioned before, I'm a vegan, so it makes me really optimistic to see that alternatives in the vegan world, that is an easy thing to do as a consumer, because we're talking a lot about the companies need to change. Of course, companies need to change too, but we as consumers choose what the companies are going to do. That's what I believe. And I'm really happy to see the increase in alternatives to dairy and the alternatives to animal meat. That market has been bigger since 10 years back.
Yeah, that's been growing significantly, in fact. Okay, well, thank you so much, Tilda.
Thank you.
Let's turn over to David Eklund. Now, David is co-founder and co-CEO. Co-CEO.
Yes. We're sharing.
Yeah. Co-founder and co-CEO of Iceberg, the world's first climate-positive outdoor footwear brand. Let's start. Just give me a little idea, a little bit more insight into the world's first climate-positive outdoor footwear brand.
Yeah. So, we have done. Let's start. First of all, footwear is a very dirty business. So we're super oil dependent, and there's no real end-of-life solution at scale yet. Still, people need shoes to get outside, when it's too cold or, to protect themselves. So people need shoes, so somebody has to make shoes.
Yeah.
So we've been working with lowering oil use and, having less of a negative impact in our production while still maintaining a high performance and, that people should be able and want to wear them as long as possible. So that is, grinding work, changing material for material, has been going on for quite a while.
Yeah.
Then summer of 2018, it was this, you weren't in Sweden then, I think.
No.
But Gothenburg now. Do you think it rains a little bit too much sometimes?
Yeah.
Summer of 2018, we didn't have any rain for 100 days.
Oh, wow.
So, there were raging forest fires up north. And our office is just, we have 5 minutes to great trails in the forest. And actually, I realized, that if you just go through that forest 10K, it's where I grew up as a kid.
Yeah.
And I always took this for granted. We were going out on the school breaks into the forests, playing hockey on the ponds. But all of a sudden, this was really struck me how fragile this was. No rain for 100 days, and all of a sudden it feels like the forest, it was in risk of not being there anymore. So I was on the way home from the beach with the family, stopped at Max, and they had this, that they were climate positive. There are problems in this claim for sure, but I was thinking, okay, so if they can do it, who are a fast food company, then surely we, who are an outdoor brand, who live by and for nature, we must be able to do that as well.
So you're saying that Iceberg wasn't always climate positive?
No.
Yeah. So tell us about what now has made it climate positive. What have you changed and how have you changed?
Yeah. So basically, what you need to do is that you need to measure, reduce what you can at that stage, and at least align with the 1.5 degrees pathway of halving every 10 years.
Yeah.
And then when you have done the measuring, and also I think it's great with the transparency, because we have published all of the climate footprints for all of our footwear on the site, and you can also track back to the factories where it's made through blockchain technology. So transparency is super important. So you measure, you reduce what you can, and then what remains, you find different ways of compensating or offsetting. So we have basically offset most of it through a UN program.
Okay. Yes, transparency provides accountability, among other things. So business transformation is already something that is challenging. There are always challenges in business transformation, especially with bigger organizations. But what were some of the challenges that you had when thinking in terms of transforming your business?
Yeah, one is that we're in a very slow-moving industry.
Yeah.
So the big challenge is first to really get the suppliers interested in providing more sustainable options than just the standard options.
Yeah.
And that took us about 1.5 years of asking the same question until they started coming back with alternatives for us. But then it has really started to catch on. So now they proactively seek this, which is a great thing. And they can also see now that this has become a competitive advantage for them, because a lot of other brands are requesting the same thing.
Yeah.
And then, if you look at materiality, we have done more or less what we can in materials that has cut between 10 and 15% in the footprint. What is really the big thing which remains now is energy use and energy source in production. So I would say that accounts for up to 50% of our remaining climate footprint, because of all of what we do, about 90% is already when it's done at the factory. So energy in the grid in Vietnam, where we produce, is still predominantly fossil. And a lot of that is coal still. So what we need to do now next is to partner up with the factories and switch to renewable energies, firstly with solar rooftop projects. And they can get 30 to 70% of their energy need from that. And it's a return of investment for 6-7 years. So the technology is there. It's a good financial case. It could be done. The halving by 2030, I don't think it really is very difficult if you really want to do it.
Yeah. So you spoke about suppliers and technology. What about employees? How I imagine being in Sweden, it might have been a bit easier than in other places. But any insight on how the transformative thinking went into the employees?
I think at times they have been quite proud, and at times also a little bit scared. And that goes for me as well. When you promise things and you don't really know if you will be able to deliver them, it's a little bit of a scary place to be.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking a lot of this, and I think that there is also there's this external sustainable development, which must be paired with kind of a collective consciousness development. So to be able to take more sustainable decisions and wanting to do that, I think we also need to mature in terms of being able to take additional perspectives, having more empathy. So it's a lot about also personal development involved. So inside and outside.
So creating a full culture in your organization, around the organization. Amazing. Can I just jump back to you really quickly, Tilda, about the culture of the people that you work with? I'm not so sure how big your company is in terms of numbers, but I imagine there's a team. Can you tell me a little bit about the culture that you try to embody?
Yeah, it's actually just me as an employee right now, so it's really in the startup phase. But I have an advisory board with people that have the competence that I don't. So I have people that, one woman that is really good at statistics, and one man that is really good at customer relationships, and one boy that is really good at working with engineering. So we try to have as much conversation as possible with each other and work together to make the company run forward. And of course, in the future, I want to have a good relation to the partners that I work with, other companies, and of course the employees. So I'll work with having a sustainable workspace for them too, not in terms of environment sustainability, but in like the social sustainability, that they're gonna want to work with Cutlery like 10 years forward or even 20 years forward, so that they're staying at the company because they like it.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of that kind of sustainability is also really important.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. I think we've come to the end of this panel discussion, but we have a following panel discussion, and we have a lot more coming in this agenda. So I want to just, take a short 10-minute break, and coming up, we have passion for climate and an open discussion around this area that is so important and so relevant and so crucial to us right now. So stick around. Welcome back to TEDxGöteborg's EnterVironment, a conversation about how we exist in harmony with the environment and our strive for happiness as we entertain ourselves in this life, and how we interact with our communities in that same regard. We're moving the discussion a bit further with our second panel. This panel really is a conversation about that strive for happiness in our daily lives and in our households, in our grocery shopping, in dining out, on our commute to work. All of these, a lot of questions arise as we think about how we live our daily lives when considering and negotiating our relationship with climate change and our relationship with the environment and environmental sustainability. This is a conversation about how we as individuals can think about the environmental sustainability in our homes, in our communities, and even in our minds. So I'll allow my esteemed panel to introduce themselves, starting with Eric. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks. I'm Eric Zinn. I work as Sustainability Director at Göteborg Energi, which is Gothenburg's own energy company, professionally. And privately, I've been working on developing my own sustainable life hacks, I guess, for the last 15, 20 years, I guess.
I like that, sustainable life hacks. We'll get into that. Yeah. Anything else?
Father of two, and I love strange bicycles, but I'll probably get back to that later.
Thanks a lot, Eric. And Britta, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a climate psychologist. I do research on climate behavior and climate engagement. And I'm also a climate activist.
Mm-hmm. Climate activists. We'll talk about that and activism. I think that's really very valuable to add to this conversation. And David, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is David Bryngesson. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of a company called Carbon Cloud, which is we deliver a digital platform to help the food industry to strategically work with, assess, and communicate the climate footprints of their products to basically help them go from today to 2050 when the problem sort of should be solved.
Yeah.
And before that, I was a researcher for 8 years, doing research on climate change mitigation.
Yeah. In our previous panel, we talked about transparency and accountability. I think this is our opportunity to take that conversation a bit further. So Carbon Cloud.
Yep.
Carbon Cloud develops innovative software that helps companies within the food industry to calculate and communicate the climate footprint of their product at scale.
Yep.
Can you talk about some of your clients, maybe? Who's interested in that type of service?
Yeah, so I would say, broadly speaking, the entire food industry sort of needs to be interested in it, because if you just assume we're decided to solve climate change, let us assume that we will continue eating once it's solved. And that means that anyone who wants to operate in that future, say 2050, when we have solved climate change, they will need to have a strategy from how to go from here to go to there. And now we work primarily with progressive food brands who are sort of willing to be in the forefront and sort of bring the topic up and communicate about it, where sort of I'd say that Oatly, for example, is a prime example, which is one of our most visual customers.
Yeah. So food in this context, it's not just about nourishment. Food is entertainment. Food is eye candy. They say we eat food twice. I think we eat it 3 times. We eat food with our eyes, and then we eat it with our nose, and then we eat it with our mouths, and then so food is entertainment for us. It's a core source of entertainment on the planet. What is climate friendly food? So thinking about climate-friendly entertainment. What is climate-friendly food?
Well, that's food that is sort of, technically speaking, like resource efficient in production. So you cause food that causes less emission to produce than other food. And also, but I would say so there's one thing, sort of the difference between categories of food, which say, generally speaking, sort of livestock-produced food, animal-based food, needs more resources, causes more emissions than plant-based. But within every category, there are huge differences. And there are sort of many things that can happen, or sort of the need to happen to sort of get down to really, really low emissions. But from an engineering perspective, it can be done. But largely, I would say that it's a collaboration and communication issue where there are so many different parts and so many different processes and different actors in the food industry, often several sort of suppliers and several steps in the production chain, and they don't typically have access to information on what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And that's sort of at the core of the problem. How do we measure it? Because before you can start acting on things to improve, you need to measure it. And the question is, how do you measure it? And that's basically how we sort of came about the idea of what if we build a network platform where everyone can measure, adhering to the same rules, share information according to some rules, and you can sort of hook things together and everyone measure their part, and then you can sort of, wherever you are in the food production chain, you can sort of, in your procurement decision, in your product development decision, sort of decide on which supplier is better, and also within your own part, you find where the emissions are and realize that sometimes you have some very cheap, easy options to lower your emissions significantly. Sometimes you have some really expensive, difficult options, but then at least you know.
Yeah.
And then we found what's really, really cool is that if you make a fuss about it, if you sort of start talking about working with this and being transparent about it, basically, hey, we're not there yet, we're not 100% perfect, but we're working on it. Then we see that the customers like that, and customers sort of are drawn to that and want to purchase that.
Yeah.
And that means that there's money fed into the system for the actors who are going in the forefront, which is awesome. And then, of course, if you're a food brand, you start doing that. You earn money from basically taking a stand. And then if you want to lower your emissions, you typically, once you're on the platform, you realize that, so our ingredients make up the biggest part. And then you can sort of send the message downwards in the value chain by procuring the ones who are performing the best. And then you get a nice incentive structure where sort of it's worthwhile to walk the extra mile, even if you're a farmer or somewhere in between, because there's a market for it.
Yeah. So I think about plant-based food being a sort of safe way to think of climate-friendly food. Is that the only way I could be thinking about climate-friendly food?
I would say no.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I mean, like, broadly speaking, plant-based is better, but there's definitely plant-based food that's terribly bad because some sort of refinement processes require huge amounts of energy, and that might be supplied by natural gas, for example. So then you get like emissions that are equivalent or higher than many animal types of food. And also you have some animal-based food that are really good for the climate. If you take sort of, and also if you talk about sort of differences between different types of food, the difference in emissions between beef and chicken is much bigger than between chicken and, say, potatoes or whatever. So from sort of climate perspective, chicken could be regarded as a vegetable. But of course, there are other issues related to sort of raising chickens. But if we're sort of sticking to climate, that's basically unproblematic.
Yeah, I've heard talk about crickets, people eating crickets, and that sort of thing as a move towards sustainability. Any ideas? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so basically all insects, or not all insects, but most insects are quite efficient at sort of converting proteins and amino acids in what they eat into sort of edible protein for us. However, there's one misconception, and there's like the insects do not produce the proteins themselves. They need to eat it. So it's quite efficient, or it's really, really efficient, but us eating the vegetables from the beginning is even more efficient. But if you talk about insects being really efficient, then you can say, but they are not that much better than, for example, poultry. So then if you sort of think it's fine to eat some sort of animals and you think chicken tastes better, of course, then the difference isn't huge. Then you can assume, if you go into the other issues, maybe a cricket won't suffer as much as a chicken would, so there could be these other sort of ethical aspects to it.
Yeah, animal rights type conversations. So in our previous panel, we talked a lot about building business and transforming business with sustainability on your mind. Now, we talked about accountability, transparency, measurability, so that we can actually be accountable. We can say, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, and we can monitor and give ourselves that sort of feedback. What are some factors that both businesses and the consumers need to be conscious of when we're thinking about that transparency? What are those factors that we're talking about? And I'm thinking mostly for the consumer who in many cases this conversation might be going over their heads. They're going to the groceries, they're trying to figure out, how do I make a purchase that is most sustainable? What are some factors that they need to consider, that businesses need to communicate to them to be able to be more climate friendly?
Yeah, I would say at the core of it is basically as a consumer, the business you're purchasing from, are they communicating about the core business or something peripheral? So basically, a classic example, are they talking about the packaging or are they talking about the product? Because there's a lot of communication about, hey, we're reducing plastic in our packaging, is lowered by so and so many percentage. Yeah, but typically that makes up a few percent of the total. What's inside is what normally matters. And also then for a business, like as you talked about in the previous panel about greenwashing. So basically, if they make up a story, or basically how they communicate. And there are things that matter eventually. You need to talk about the packaging. You need to talk about the transport. You need to talk about all these things as well. But you should start with the core business. What is it that you actually do in your company?
Yeah.
And are they communicating about that? And then, of course, there are these is it verified by third party, which also matters, of course. And then there's a lot of third parties. So before there are these ubiquitous standards, of course, it's hard for a consumer to know whom to trust. But that's, we're trying to solve that problem. And if it's not us, I hope someone else. Where you need some measurement scheme that is really trustworthy. So you don't need to do sort of the PhD to understand it, but you can sort of read up on it and know that, okay, this supplier, so this third party really, really know what they're talking about, so we can trust it.
Yeah. So you're talking about core values on one end, and you're also speaking about sort of outside validation and verification.
Yeah.
But then you also speak about labels.
Yeah.
Now, when I go to a label, I think about colors and I think about branding. And of course, branding is connected to core values to a great extent. And I also think about nutritional facts and that sort of thing. Now speak to the businesses. So when I'm now preparing my labeling to demonstrate myself as environmentally conscious, my brand, are you saying that we need to put our core values on the label? How would you approach, or what advice would you give to businesses when thinking about communicating via the label?
Wow. Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, talking about core values, I mean, it's like, I don't know. A business can have many different core values, and depending on who you're trying to communicate with. But I mean, at the core of it, it's basically, what are you doing with your core business? It's are you really trying to get there? And I don't know, but I mean, like when you're talking to customers, you typically have a few seconds for them to make up their mind when they're making a choice. I mean, it's really hard. It's very, very hard, and there's it needs to be simplified in a way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's oversimplified, and there are many different factors that matter to people, and there are some labels will boil down several of them into one label, and that of course makes it harder to know what happens with the factors you care about. And from our perspective, we focus on climate change because their society has some very clear targets. It's quantitative. We're decided as a society what we're going to do about it. And then we measure just that. And then we say, of course, there are other things that are extremely important as well. But I think sometimes when there are too many things and it's too sort of fluffy, as it were, it becomes sort of watered down, and the risk is that you get this fatigue when you have 7 different labels and they don't communicate very clearly exactly what they do, and people sort of get fatigued and stop caring maybe, or stop trusting, which I think is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, but it certainly is important to communicate authentically and to communicate transparently in a way that demonstrates accountability. And as you said, third-party verification is something that I guess consumers and businesses need to share. So I guess my final thought, or my final question on this is, where can we find this third-party verification? How do we know who are the verifiers that we can trust? Is there a website? Is there what do I Google to know that this verification is noteworthy?
Well, broadly speaking, I mean, there are many trustworthy third parties, of course. What we are doing from our end is that we're building this network where everyone can sort of model their products, and we have an open website. So you can go to our website, and you can basically, all the products that are published there. So if you get a label from us, you also need to publish a report on our website, which is open for everyone to look at. Where the idea is sort of basically to make it easily accessible to understand, and then if you want to dig deeper, first, like you read something that's quite easy, sort of written in layman terms, but then if you want to dig down the rabbit hole, you can, and sort of the nitty-gritty science, should you wish to. And that's sort of our hypothesis for a system that hopefully can solve the problem. But
well, we're certainly getting there, and with organizations like yours providing that sort of insight, I think we're moving forward, certainly. Thank you so much for this knowledge, this wealth of knowledge around how we bring businesses and consumers together through effective labeling. Britta. So Britta is a psychologist and an environmental activist. She's also an expert on reducing climate anxiety with positive communication and achievable goals. Now, Britta, tell me a little bit more about just about those things. What is climate anxiety?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess all of us can relate to that. Perhaps situations where you feel helplessness and anxiety about the future.
Yeah.
The future is fundamentally uncertain, so that can create anxiety for many.
Yeah. So that's sort of you're talking about looking at climate change as this sort of scary issue that I guess with that anxiety we could find ourselves just wanting to avoid the topic entirely. You know, and I think that there are many among us who would rather just look the other way, because they feel as though this is too big of a challenge for me to take on. How can we understand that sort of avoidance a little bit more? And are there, to use Eric's term just now, are there psychological hacks to surpass this sort of avoidance and help our lives actually become green friendly in a way that's not overwhelming?
Yeah. So to understand this avoidance, it's basically a way for us to get rid of difficult emotions. So let's take a common situation. We read an article about climate change, and that article, the information, the images might make you feel a number of emotions: helplessness, anxiety, or even anger or fear. And as human beings, we want to get rid of such difficult and negative emotions. And we do so by, unconsciously, of course, activate a number of psychological defenses. So it can be that we might downplay the seriousness of the issue, or we might distract ourselves and start thinking about something else, or we might create this psychological distance by thinking, oh, climate change, it will only happen over there, or only happen to other people.
Yeah.
Or we might we might think that it's too late, and it's useless that I think of this anyways. And at the far end of the spectrum, we of course have climate denial, which is also a kind of defense, not for everyone, but for many. And so the hack is to start thinking about climate change and talking and engaging with climate change in ways that also evokes positive emotions. And we can apply that on ourselves in our private lives, but it also, of course, applies to climate communicators, scientists, politicians, and companies. And so how do we evoke positive emotions? We can focus more on solutions and things that we all can do as individuals. We can start focusing more on the work that is already being done around the world by amazing people and companies, the steps that has already been taken, and also start talking about climate change more in collective terms. There is fascinating research showing that when you talk to people about climate change in terms of, or when you stop talking about climate change only in terms of you and I should do this and that, and switch over to talking about it in terms of we and us, this is a collective problem, people actually switch over to another cognitive mode where they are more likely to sacrifice personal gains and more likely to be willing to contribute to the common good.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, I think.
So, I mean, we're speaking right now about avoidance from the perspective of the way we think and the way we feel. What about those of us who we're cognitively aware, we're also aware of our emotional state around climate change, and we know that we have a part to play, and there are some things that we know that we have to do to contribute to a greener planet, but we just don't. Why does that happen? What's the psychology behind our actions not lining up with what we know to be right in that context?
Yeah. So we talked about like company values before.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea also to focus on personal values, and what you're talking about is that there's no straight line between our values and what we might rationally think is the good thing to do and the right thing to do, and our actions. There are many things that interfere between that, and two important factors are social norms and habits. So regarding social norms, we tend to like to think about ourselves as these rational and free-thinking individuals, but in reality we're social animals imitating each other.
Sheep.
Yeah, sheep, and we do that more than we like to think.
Yeah.
And regarding habits, most of our behaviors are on autopilot, right? It's not things that we think about deliberately, and that applies to things we buy in the grocery store, or how we plan our vacation. We do. It's easier for us to do the things that we're used to do, rather than doing what we think is rationally right or that is in line with our values, maybe. So so to act more according to your values, the first step, of course, is to just stop a little bit and reflect on what you think is important in life, what you want to contribute with. And it might sound like a cliche to do that, but I think many people would benefit from doing it. I think that in our culture, we're not used to really talking about values and virtues and what it means to be a good person. We're more used to talking about, how to live a successful life. And I believe that many of us has moved us away from our values a little bit.
Yeah.
So knowing your values, the next step might be also looking at people around you, people you follow on social media, maybe. Do they act in line with your values?
Yeah.
And if not, seek out people that act in line with your values. People that do the things that you want to do, and just start imitate them really. And then also, think about how can you design your habits in a way that are in line with your values.
Yeah.
Or your family's habits, maybe.
So what you're talking about is a real deep importance of community, because you started off by saying that we imitate each other, we imitate the people around us, and so because of that imitation, for us to be able to take advantage of that, we have to be able to look and make sure that the people who are around us who we're going to imitate are in alignment with the values that we have decided that we want to have. So let's talk about the importance of community. And dare I say, let's talk about the importance of activism as well, because you are an activist. And now that's two separate things, but I feel as though activism can influence the community. And that's where I want to go with this. Talk about the importance of community, and why do you think collective action is so important, and how activism influences that?
Yeah, so two main reasons. The one is political and the other is psychological. And so from the political perspective, when people go together and do something, or when many people go together and do something, it sends a clear signal to politicians and stakeholders. And we need political decisions now. What we do at the individual level is, what we consume and etc. It's very important because it creates new social norms. But we also need politicians to, take those difficult decisions and create incentives for the more people to act environmental friendly. And just looking at history, it's clear that social movements and innovation, of course, have been very important to create these large cultural and societal shifts. I think about the civil rights movement with Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King. They demonstrated, they even used civil disobedience to mobilize people and force these changes in discriminating laws. Yeah. And I think about the suffragettes who made it possible for women to get the vote, and many other examples. I find it fascinating that today these groups of people, they are considered heroes, right? But at the time they were seen as criminals and crazy outliers. For political reasons, but also I mentioned psychological reasons. I think many of us sometimes feel doubt that what we do might not be efficient enough, or feel that we don't have the energy to even think of and engage in this difficult issue. And then being in a community, just seeing other people around you, talking to people around you that are engaging in this issue and do the things that you want to do, that gives you energy and social support to keep working.
Yeah,
I think it's really important that we have spaces where we can contribute together with others.
Yeah,
to make this whole journey more endurable and fun.
So
even.
we have to actively go after communities of people, whether they're small communities or larger communities, who embody the values that we've set out for ourselves. Can you give a little bit, some tips on how to start setting values for yourself? Because it sounds easy on the surface, but something tells me there's more to deciding what values matter. And just to qualify that a bit, you mentioned social media. Social media algorithms are made in such a way where we are surrounded by posts from people who say things that we agree with, posts from people that are likely to be liked by us. So it may not be that easy to look on your social media and see a different perspective. You have to dig a bit deeper.
Yeah.
So in the context of all of that, how would you go about setting values?
Yeah, that's a really important and good question. You're mentioning social media. I think it's a good idea to start stepping out of that bubble for a moment, because we are all those images, they really speak to our subconscious. So there's a lot of manipulation going on there, for sure. So taking a break from that bubble for a while. And another tool is to picture yourself lying on your, deathbed, and looking back on your life. What do you want to see? Or there are versions of this this tool. It could also be what you want to say to your grandchildren that you did during your lifetime, or what you want your friends and family to say about you on your during your funeral.
And write that down. Yeah.
Yeah, and write that down, exactly.
Okay.
That might be helpful.
Thank you so much, Britta. Now, let me just. You seem to be you seem to have a toolkit, and it seems simple enough to implement. And then you're also talking about the role of activism throughout history. Does all of that make you optimistic about the future when it comes to environmental sustainability?
I usually shift between being optimistic and pessimistic. It all seems to depend on what article I just read or who I just talked to. So reading the IPCC report from last week, of course, made me a bit disheartened. But then again, reading about the development of green technology, for example, or just seeing all the climate actions that happened this week, actually, in Oslo and London, that makes me hopeful and optimistic.
Yeah.
So I like to think about optimism and pessimism like tools, rather than an identity that you are or not. And a really good climate psychologist called Per Espen Stoknes, he said that these tools, they are like the right and left eyes. They're best used together. So we need optimism to find energy, to keep engaging with this, to not give up completely. But we might also need some pessimism to not become too naive or lazy and think that it will be solved automatically.
Yeah, I think that's some really good advice. I haven't heard that before. Thanks so much. So let's dive into Eric. Eric, how are you?
I'm very good and very inspired. Some powerful tools.
Inspiring
sure.
conversation here. So Eric Zinn is the head of sustainability at Göteborg Energi. In English, it's Gothenburg Energy. And he's a specialist in all the ways an average person can reduce their climate impact. Now, Eric, I wanted to talk to you about being at home. Being at home, watching TV, taking a shower, cooking, just living our life where we strive for entertainment, we strive for happiness. Of course, here in Sweden, there's a conscientiousness that flows through society when it comes to recycling and that sort of thing. Globally, it's not exactly the same thing, but as we entertain ourselves at home, what are some of the ways that we are unknowingly impacting the climate?
I think you mentioned a very important word there, happiness.
Yeah.
And that's why we try to entertain ourselves. And that's what, I guess you might say some of the meaning of life might be to be happy. And the way we do this, of course, differs from person to person. Some people think they need lots of stuff and lots of people around them to be happy, where others can get along with more like a less is more kind of strategy. But there's a lot of knowledge into what is happiness, but we trick ourselves thinking that consumerism is going to make us happy.
Yeah.
And you're talking about what we're doing at home. We're buying stuff. We're using stuff.
We're consuming.
We're consuming.
Yeah.
And as you were on with the social media, and of course social media in the form of advertising has been with us as long as industrialism has been with us. And that's really gone into our souls, where we think that if we're unhappy or we want to stay this happy, we need to buy something new. We need to buy something more. We need to buy stuff And I mean, there's this great expression from Fight Club, where we're buying things that we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people we don't even like.
Yeah.
So the trick to actually staying happy is turning that around and questioning your own consumerism. And when we do that, we realize we open entirely new doors. I mean, you can actually, by reducing your consumerism, you can actually buy time. I mean, you can actually maybe work a little bit less. You can actually get a job that you enjoy, right? And now we're into entertainment, happiness.
Yeah.
You're doing something that you enjoy. You've got a little bit of time over. You can actually maybe take up a new pastime.
Yeah.
Like dance. I love dancing. I dance a lot more. I love that. And then now you're a happier person. You're becoming a more mature, more developed person in line with your values. You actually have time to spend with other people that are maybe done the same choice. And now you're surrounding yourself with all these cool, mature, developing people. And you might even run into your soulmate, and doing that isn't easy. Mine's called Helene, and it's really not. But when you get these things going, I mean, then you are an entertained person.
Yeah.
But let's do the easy hacks.
Yeah.
Easy hacks also do that as well. I mean, for an entertainment side, we've already touched on to some of the big ones. I mean, of course, red meat, especially beef. You have people over for eating. Cut down on the beef. That's a very quick one.
Yeah.
And now social media, we've got electronics just all over the place. So not always buying this new stuff, trying to get recycled stuff. And that's an enormous climate benefit by buying recycled electronics. And we were onto the packaging before. I mean, plastics is a major issue when it comes to our consumerism and the climate impact. I mean, all that plastic that we use, most of it actually gets incinerated and becomes a carbon dioxide emission. I mean, 15% of the plastic that we use in Sweden actually get recycled. And it's not because we're not taking it to the recycling station. It's because we're not asking for recycled products instead. So there's some easy hacks, but the biggest one, the most important one, other than looking at your values, is then questioning the consumerism in your life, because that's not going to make you a happy person.
Yeah. So this is a wider conversation about consumerism, building communities around brands and shared values and human values. I really like how this conversation is coming together. So spend less by wanting to impress people less. Now, there might be a question in there for you about how do we care less about impressing our community? You want to comment on that a little bit, Britta?
I think evolutionary, it's difficult. I think we have this drive to impress people, but I think it's more a question of who are the people that we want to impress and in what ways. Mm-hmm. You know, you can impress other people by being very generous and compassionate and just being there listening. That's also that's a more green way to impress others.
So it goes back to auditing your community.
Yeah.
Auditing and editing.
And of course, that dinner party is going to be much more worthwhile when you actually have a meaningful discussion with a person and not just talk about the wallpaper or your new car. I mean, and I think we've all been through those actually they're quite difficult, those dinner parties, where people just talk about what they've been doing and what they've been buying and what they're hoping to buy next and where they're hoping. That's not a meaningful human discussion.
Yeah.
It's more let's open up ourselves and try and grow together, and that's an entirely different discussion. It has nothing to do with wallpaper.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Eric, personally, do you walk through life thinking about sustainability? How does this settle on your mind and on your spirit? What do you do that helps you with your consumerism and your and the way you live and strive for happiness?
Well, it's never been sustainability as such. It's been happiness, and that's how I came into realizing that the only way we can both stay happy but also succeed in becoming sustainable is finding a happy path down that road. I mean, why do we struggle so much with legislation and prohibition and all of these things? Because people perceive them as becoming less happy. Life is going to be less fun if we can't do this, buy that, and so on and so forth. But we missed the point that, I mean, we didn't just stumble across happiness and satisfaction of life recently. I mean, it's part of the human experience. People have been happy and satisfied with life as long as we've been on this planet.
Yeah.
The thing is that we've been tricking ourselves into thinking that the only reason we're this happy is because we buy so much stuff. But once we take care of the important stuff, I mean, somewhere to stay, somewhere to eat, something meaningful to do, some good relationships, I mean, that's happiness, and you can develop on that. Buying more stuff is not going to add onto that, but it's definitely going to screw up our future.
Yeah. Okay. So instead of buying things, you talk about your own sort of way of living, green hacks. We had a conversation previously about a pool and things like that. What are some things that you have in your life or that people can incorporate in their lives to just make it more entertaining in a smart, green way?
I think anyone who's interested in the topic can really just buy a book about happiness research, because that's actually, it sounds a bit odd. It's a real thing. I mean, there's scientists that actually look into the human experience, try and measure how do we perceive things, what the choices that we make, how long are we happy with them, and compare countries and all kinds of things. So it's an enormous amount of knowledge already out there that can help anyone guide them in their own choices. But to simplify things in a Swedish context, the way like a general person might live, is that we work too hard. We work way too hard. We work for things that we don't really want to do. I'm not saying that all jobs in the world can be fun. That's for sure. But happiness and meaningfulness go very much hand in hand. So trying to find your values and live by them is definitely a shortcut to a happy life. But the way things have worked around in my life, when I started seeing that happiness is also going to go hand in hand with sustainability, that's when I actually downsized my life and started working less. It was in conjunction with me having kids.
Yeah.
And we have a fantastic system in Sweden where you can actually have a very lengthy paternal leave, and you can actually try and stretch it a bit more as well. And growing up with your kids, I mean, I'm not saying it's easy work, but there is nothing more worthwhile, nothing that fulfills me with satisfaction talking about my deathbed and what my grandkids are going to be talking about me. I'm securing that story for the future by doing that. And then while I'm at home with my kids, I mean, at certain stages, they weren't even speaking. I mean, they're just throwing stuff and I have to clean it up. Then I'm learning how do I feed them. So I'm learning to all kinds of new, cool vegetarian food. And lots of things have happened over the last 10 or 15 years when it comes to vegetarian. And that was hard at first. I didn't grow up in a vegetarian home. But knowing what I'm giving my kids, both nutrition-wise, but also giving them the tools and the taste buds for a vegetarian future, and the satisfaction is enormous.
Yeah.
Now that home-cooked vegetarian food is a lot cheaper than that meat-packed industrial food so I'm saving even more money. So what do I do now? Well, I actually did buy something. I bought a cargo bike. So what's that? A cargo bike, it's a bike with a box. What's so great about that? The kids love it. So now I'm out, do your kids love taking the car? I'm strapped to the car. I don't really enjoy this at all. In the bike, they see everything, they smell everything, they're enjoying themselves, we're talking, we're pointing, and they get this whole nature experience, and they grew up accustomed to using bike as a main mode of transportation. And I'm saving money because I'm not using that car. And then we go back to my final and possibly my funnest life hack. And that's when I bought my Velomobile. And my Velomobile, what is that? It's you might call it a Flintstone car, but it's a recumbent tricycle shaped like a bullet. And for the last years, I've been taking it back and forth to work. Of course, saving enormous amounts of emissions, but that's possibly not my priority. I want to be happy. All of that exercise is putting this gigantic smile on my face. At work, I'm happy and I'm interacting with everyone in a much better way. And actually, my imagination is measurably, I'm not measuring it, of course, but I feel I have a much better mindset. And I'm going back and forth, and people are waving, and they're taking pictures of me in this strange, Flintstone car. And I come back home from work, talking about what I do, what I love to do at work, and what I love just transporting myself. Does that sound happy to you?
It does.
It's fantastic. And this is not strange. It's not difficult. It's easy. But we just need to go back to our values, what's important for us, what stories do we want to tell when we die, and start building those stories now. And it's just around the corner. You
mentioned giving your children a vegetarian palate. Talk about that a little bit. What were some of the approaches you used to do that for those of us out here who are just beginning to have children and want to cultivate a shared value system in their families? How does that work when they are developing a sense of consumerism and their burgers on TV and those sorts of things?
That's a good, and I don't think I've solved it because I'm right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But my experience is, of course, when they're small, it's easy. I mean, they have no social framework. They're not interacting with anybody but myself. So I have a fantastic opportunity to open that palate with the taste of chickpeas and tofu, with alternative, and not filling it with meat. Because I don't avoid meat because of the taste.
Yeah.
It tastes great. Otherwise, we wouldn't be eating it. But I need to help them wean off or not even get addicted to that taste. The tricky part, of course, comes when they get friends and they go to school, and school is not vegetarian entirely, and you got this whole consumerism, and you got I'm not going to say the brands, but you've got these gigantic brands marketing meat burgers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Of course, they'll take part of it, and I don't want to shame them on that, but we do discuss it.
Yeah.
And I lead by example. So when we do go for that hamburger that they've been asking for, and I just don't have it, and then they start asking, why aren't you eating it? And then I say, that's why and why I don't eat it. So they chew, and they're happy with it, but they're thinking, and the next time around they say, Dad, can we make a vegetarian burger at home? Okay, they still go to these places sometimes, but we have definitely downsized their meat consumption, and that's going to be a fantastic tool for them in the future, because I do not see meat being consumed in the future the same way it is now. So it's easier for them to make that transition when they're younger than when they're older.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like I want to just push that kids question a little bit further, because it's so relevant. Britta, can you chime in a little bit, maybe on parental approaches to communicating with children about climate change? So sort of like being an activist in your own family, sort of like creating that community within your own home.
Yeah, it's definitely important to talk about it. But the first step for some might be to dealing with your own defenses, maybe.
Yeah.
And dealing with your own anxiety around just not knowing actually, but talking with your children about that, and getting comfortable together with knowing that you cannot know how the future will develop.
Yeah. It's open conversation.
Yeah.
Let me ask David, taking it out to an industrial level, just bringing it out again and creating that community. Your organization it can be seen as a pillar of that conversation within the community. Is there an ecosystem almost of shared values and community that's happening in the business world? And is there a way to join that conversation? Is there a conversation that's happening?
Wow, that's a very good question. I would say, I don't know, most of the people that we encounter, like as in people within the companies, want to do good. Most people want to do something good in the world, but they're sort of constrained by the reality of the financial system, basically. And they're sort of at the core of what we have sort of discovered. We're by no means the only ones who've discovered this, but it's basically that you can, as a company, make money from doing good things. Meaning that you, as a company, you don't even need to care about climate change to sort of profile the company for sort of climate smart offers and being transparent and all of this that we sort of help them do, because it just makes business sense. And then we have seen, like I have personally interacted with a bunch of people within companies who didn't care. All right, we try it. They start realizing, hey, we're pretty good at this. It's good for business. And then you see them sort of changing their view of themselves as individuals, even like, yeah, we are the ones going in the forefront here. We are like really braving this. And then I'm sitting there remembering, yeah, but it took some convincing for you to, like, and someone being really skeptical, whatever. But then, yeah, it's like, I think there is still a lot of skepticism within industry where people sort of, they at some level want to do good, but they think that it's sort of inconsistent with making money for their shareholders, which what they have to do to sort of stay in their strategic position. But when they sort of can make this realization, when they have this conversation facilitated, as you talk about, then that becomes easy and they can solve it. Because like, I don't think anyone or hardly anyone in the world sees themselves as bad. Everyone's a good guy. It's just that you have different views of what that entails, right?
Yeah, yeah. Businesses have sometime recently started talking about the triple bottom line. So it's not just about profits. It's about profits, people, and the planet. And has that sort of triple bottom line moved us forward, you know, in practice? Even Michael Porter, Harvard lecturer, has spoken about the possibility of sustainability and profitability to coexist. In practice, in that ecosystem that it beginning to exist, does that really materialize, do you think?
I think it does. Or I mean, like, I, for my own sanity, need to think that it does. Sort of like, we are soon to be 10 billion people here. And if we're going to keep on doing what we're doing for any lengthy period of time, it needs to be more sustainable. Or it's just not going to sort of, we aren't going to be around very long, basically, at the rate things are going. But like, again, for the things that we do need to lead happy lives, to sort of keep people fed, housed, healthy, we can do that. We can set up those economic systems. We can create the incentive structures. And sometimes we need the legal frameworks to do that. But typically from a company perspective, as long as the framework is there and clear and transparent, you can abide by it. You can follow it and you can make your plans.
Yeah.
The problem for the industry is when the framework is unclear and it's changing rapidly or sort of unpredictably.
Yeah. Nice, thank you. I think this segment has been quite a number of ideas worth spreading, certainly. So what we want to do right now is play a short video introducing our next guests. They're called Passion for Climate, and they're a dance group that is making waves here in Sweden around this advocacy for sustainability in the environment. So let's have a look at this intro video as we prepare ourselves to continue the conversation just a bit further.
Ja, ytterligare en dag att rädda världen. Vem är jag att predika om klimatet? Fast nej, okej. Nej, kom igen nu. Beast mode. Nu kör vi alltså. Nu får vi för fan tro på oss själva. Nu kör vi. Ingen är perfekt. Jag kan inte lösa allt. Och lite roligt får man ha också. Nu kör vi.
Det här projektet handlar inte om att vara perfekt. Lägga världens alla problem på dina axlar. Eller att ha förbannat tråkigt. Det handlar snarare om att ha roligt. Och att via nya spännande idéer kunna uppmärksamma klimatet. Jag heter Denny Hultén. Jag kommer från Arvsfondsprojektet Passion for Climate, där vi arbetar med passioner och intressen för att göra just det, att uppmärksamma klimatet. Men hur gör vi det?
So we're back with TEDxGöteborg, and we're continuing our conversation around EnterVironment and how we as humans strive for happiness and entertainment and balance that with our responsibility for environmental sustainability. And what you would have just watched is a video from the dance group Passion for Climate. Passion for Climate. And so we're here with Denny and Tevin, who are Passion for Climate. Maybe, Denny, you can tell me... Then you can tell us a little bit about what Passion for Climate is and maybe why that name.
So Passion for Climate started from another project actually that we had together with Chalmers, where we looked at how we can use dance to highlight the climate issue in a more interactive way that is not just the monotone way of usually how you would maybe assume that a doctor or a professor would talk about a more apocalyptic issue. And from that, we then further looked into how can you use any type of passion into highlighting the climate issue, and therefore Passion for Climate.
Okay. So is it that Passion for Climate was born out of a personal passion for the climate? And if so, where did that come from?
Well, in all honesty, I would say no.
Okay.
It's funny, I had an interview calling me and asking me, what type of education do you have within climate? And I said, none. And that person said, well, so then should you be someone that leads this type of project? And I said, well, maybe I might actually be the right person to lead it, because I'm just a normal person, living a normal life that tries to deal with the normal problems, and So in that sense, am I answering the question now?
Are you passionate about the climate?
So in a sense, we looked into. We always do now. We use our dance, our passion, into solving different type of issues in society.
Yeah.
And I think that you cannot not notice the climate issue now.
Yeah.
So of course, climate issue is a part of us, and I think it has grown into being a passion for us, and for me at least.
Yeah.
So yes, now.
So last point on this, would you say that Passion for Climate is an activist group?
I would say, maybe it depends on how you look at it.
Okay.
But I would say it's more of an encouragement to young people in general.
Yeah.
To see how you can use something to benefit something more than just yourself.
Yeah.
But also without sacrificing the thing that you love, which is your passion. So if you can find something, most people know, if you don't, go find it, your passion, because that is your fuel. And once you have that, and then find something else that you can benefit without then the cost of your passion, then I think you got the total package there.
Yeah, okay. So, Tevin.
Yes.
So you're a dancer.
Yes.
And as a member of Passion for Climate, can you tell me, so this is immediately a joining of entertainment, dance, and the environment. Tell me about how Passion for Climate started, or at least how you guys came together to create this movement that you're creating, and what it means to you from a dance perspective.
Okay, to start off with the question, I haven't been in Passion for Climate since the beginning.
Yeah.
and I just started recently getting into it, and maybe half a year ago.
Okay.
So when it comes to the history of Passion for Climate, I don't know it too well, but the dance side of it, I've always in some way used my passion for something. But when it came to starting using Passion for Climate, one of my very first ideas was actually using second-hand clothes instead of buying new clothes, because as we all know, it's not the best choice, or the best choice would to create your own clothes, but I don't know how to sew, so I won't do that or even try doing that, even if it would be fun, because I loved sewing when I was a child. But when it came to dancing, I was thinking, okay, dancers, clothes, is there any way I can change my procedure when it came to the clothing aspects of it? So I thought, okay, for my next dance video, I'm gonna use secondhand clothes and start there. And then, of course, in the future, hopefully, I'll be able to make more changes. Because, for example, we need water when we train, so okay, maybe use something else than a plastic bottle and try to use a more reusable bottle that I can use many times over. And you need to be creative and think outside the box, but still within the box of dancing. And I try to do it through either in this time for one of my ideas when it came to doing a dance video, it was through clothing, and through my personal, it's using a reusable water bottle.
And how did you run into Denny?
Well, he sort of is my boss.
Yeah. How did you find yourself using Passion for Climate as an outlet for that sort of expression that you're talking about?
It was actually through getting inspired by him and his colleagues at Twisted Feet DA, where they did this project behind the scenes. But of course, because I work at Twisted Feet as a dance teacher, I saw their videos and I saw how they used dancing specifically. There's one specific show that I think was one of the main reasons you started with this, 5 Degrees, and that really impacted a lot of people, because the theme, if I would shortly describe it, I know you're better at describing this show than me. 5 Degrees is, I would say, almost dystopian story of how the different degrees affect the planet. And they tell a story okay, at 1 degree, this happens, 2 degrees, this, and so on. And you see how Earth changes through the degrees through dancing. And that inspired me to be oh, this is one way you can do this. And then, because Passion for Climate aired afterwards when I was teaching dance at their school, this inspired me to be a part of it, and then it just has grown on me more and more.
Yeah. Okay. And Denny, how did it start? How did you turn the considerations that you had about the climate into an organization? Because Tevin just called you his boss. So
no, but I think it is, as you told it to Tevin, that something needs to start somewhere, and for a young kid, it needs to be some type of uplifting encouragement. Of course, it doesn't always need to be uplifting. It can be traumatic as well. We focus on the uplifting part, maybe.
We do.
But yeah, so we've seen how dancing has impacted our lives and how it impacts kids. And we've just looked into it further. How you can use that for a good cause, in this case, the climate.
Yeah.
And then why stop with dancing? You can go with any type of passion or interest. I don't know what you like, but whatever.
What was the receptivity by the community? How did people respond to this new approach to entertainment?
Yes, so it's a bit funny. Always in the beginning, you're being put into a category of being a dancer. So then the questions always occur that, how are you going to dance yourself to a better climate? It's not that simple. That's not the only thing we're doing. We're just showing how we're using our passion to make a climate positive impact. Now it's up to you. What do you like? And then we start that discussion. So once that is being put on the table, then the conversation goes more smoothly.
Yeah. So your work is with a lot of young people. What's the age group that you work with typically? And tell me a little bit about how they receive, what's the vibe about climate change and environmental sustainability among young people right now?
So, we started out with saying our target group is everybody, but that doesn't go too well with investors. So we took it down to between 13 and 25.
Yeah.
I mean, and the second question was about
what's the vibe? How are young people talking about, thinking about, and dancing about the climate?
Well, I mean, maybe you would be a good representative there. I mean, we're talking about dancing in general.
By all means.
Yeah.
Yeah, so dancing-wise, it's very popular and it's very it's cool. It's like you utilize your body to express.
And you work with trends.
Yeah, you work TikTok. Don't even get me started. Yeah. Nah, but it's fun because you utilize your body. It's not like the theoretical part of your speaking about it. Oh, this is the numbers, this is the facts. But now you get to showcase your emotions, showcase how you feel about it more, and it becomes so much more personal. And because you're actually doing something with it instead of just talking. So in that essence, dance, it's like everyone in here has been to the club at one point, or at least have danced or listened to music and be like, yes, this is the song. Think of it, but you have a deeper meaning now to it. So it becomes much more personal in that essence of oh, now I'm telling my story. I'm telling these facts. I'm telling these emotions of how I perceive this article I just read. Oh, now it becomes more, how do you say, broad, because you can't put words in a dance because you don't use words when you dance. But when someone sees it, especially between teenagers and adolescents, they don't want, sorry to say it, the boring facts. They want to see it, they want to feel it, they want what's hip or trending, especially trending. The word trending is very important right now. If the more trending something is, the more you're receptive for it, and then you slide in this fact while they're being, oh my God, this is so amazing, this is so cool. Oh, did you know about this? Da 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 da. And then you start to have this discussion and conversation about it while it's still being fun, and everyone can take a part in it, then just more conversation.
Yeah. Tevin, you spoke about a dystopian dance earlier.
Yeah.
What do you think is more effective from your observation and your experience to talk about the potential doom and gloom or to inspire about a potentially optimistic future?
Optimistic future, and always for me, I'm a very optimistic person, but, and I have to be really clear about this, you need to be realistic. You can't be too optimistic, and for me, you can't really be too pessimistic as well. You need both of them, but at the fundamental part, you need to be realistic about something. Because if you're too optimistic and not realistic, then you're gonna live in this dream fantasy, dream world where you're gonna be like, everything's good while a house is burning behind you. That doesn't work. But at the same, like, if you're pessimistic, then you're gonna be discouraged to even try doing something.
Yeah.
So for me, personally, optimistic, but stay realistic and stay to the ground and understand and try to improve everything in a positive way, but also have the thoughts in the behind your mind to be like, okay, this is bad. Okay, what are the consequences because of that? Oh, it's this. How can I take this information, change, rearrange it? Can I do it more uplifted? Can I do it like this? Can I twist it? Can I turn it? Okay, now it's less of a problem. Can I find a solution to it? Oh, let's go. Perfect. But being too pessimistic will degrade you or discourage you to even bother trying, because if everyone in here were depressed, nobody would have the energy to do anything. So I think be optimistic, but always go back and be realistic about everything around you that's going on.
Okay. Danny, my last question for you. What's the future for Passion for Climate? What sort of impact are you expecting to make?
I mean, I think it's always been for us to change the norm.
Yeah.
To have that, just as something becomes, of course you're going to recycle. That's a norm now. That's something you want to, that's how we want you to look even at your passion and what you like to do. Okay, I like doing this. I'm getting good at it. Okay, how can I use that to benefit something more than just me? So if you get this mentality in, and if you see others do it, then I think it becomes a part of your life. And I think that is what we want to do.
Okay, nice. Thank you. Now, at this point, I want to let you all know that before we came here, I asked all of the panelists to think about some questions that they want to ask each other, just to get the conversation going a little bit. So I'm going to start with David.
Me? Okay.
David, do you? I mean, now, of course, I'm not expecting you to have a prepared question, but maybe this conversation, you want to take it a bit further in one of the many directions that we've had. Is there anything that you feel like you want to know from anyone on the panel here?
I think it was many super interesting things, and I think tying back to both what you guys said and the climate psychology part of it, it's like we have a great opportunity to be on the right side of history in a really big topic, and we can work with that in many different ways, but nobody can claim they don't know anymore that this is an important or critical topic.
Yeah.
But I had one when I heard you guys talking, because I was thinking you were talking about making it uplifting or upbeat, but I was thinking that kind of the feeling that maybe create this creative process is from a place of anxiety, perhaps, about the climate. So how is that creative process emotionally? Or I'm just guessing here, but this would be a guess.
No, it's funny, because what you just said, Tevin, is that I'm the total opposite. I trigger from I wouldn't say long-lived depression, but from sad emotion is where I kick off. But I mean, just watch a movie. If you take Lord of the Rings, I mean, it's not a happy story. The world is about to end. But through this hard journey, you see a lot of lights, and in the end, I mean, he throws the ring into the fire, and we're all good and dandy. So, I mean, in one sense, that is the way for me. It has to be an emotional journey for me at first, and that triggers from something that is wrong, usually for me. I mean, you don't fix something that isn't broken. So something needs to break, and then you're like, it broke. And then you start, okay, maybe now I got time to, and then that continues from there. But yeah, it's, of course, it differs from everybody, just like you said. But of course, the anxiety can definitely be a trigger. You might be careful, especially with young kids. So when we're working with kids, again, anxiety works the same way. but you just have to be careful. You have to have that just in Lord of the Rings. I'm not willing to watch 3 movies, 3 hours each, with just anxiety. So if you have that in mind, then I think that, I mean, comedy stand-up comedy is a great example. You see how they work with deep and questions that is not so fun, to be honest, but they make it fun. So maybe that's...
To just develop his question, but short. Like when I was working in Twisted Feet's office with the memories and their documentaries about 5 degrees, because it has such a devastating or dystopian story behind it, a lot of people were like, oh my god, we need to do something now, they were riled up because of it. And the positive thing about that was that, now they're engaged, they want to do something, because their emotions were like this all throughout the story. We're like, okay. So I think when you want to work with it or showcase it, you work as Denny, to not have this, everything is good, uplifting, because you can't be on a positive high peak all the time. It doesn't work. You need to go like a berg- och dalbana.
Roller coaster.
Thank you. Like a roller coaster. And when you try to engage with people, in people's emotions specifically. So I think you need a mixture of both. But I think, for me at least, in the end, you want people to be engaged and want to do it, instead of like, man, everything is messed up, I don't want to do this anymore, like,
Of course. Thank you. Britta, I'm going to jump to you.
Okay.
Do you have a question for anyone on this panel? Anything that sparked, jumped out at you?
Yeah, I just made one up actually. It's about energy consumption. So it's for you. He works at Gothenburg Energy, if you forgot. So I was thinking about competitions. Competitions and comparisons can sometimes be a good driving factor for us to make an extra effort. So creating competitions between countries maybe, or cities to be the most green city or most green nation might be a funny solution or hack. So my question for you is, do you know how Gothenburg, we're in Gothenburg right now, how is Gothenburg doing compared to other cities in our energy consumption?
There's so many different ways to answer that question.
Okay.
We're doing, the simple one is we're doing pretty good, but we've got a long way left to go. From an energy side, we are pretty big energy consumers. I mean, we are part of the Western world. We don't differ in that way. But we've built technical systems in this city that allow us to use a lot of recycled energy rather than using pristine energy. So we have, from a heating, I mean, this is a cold part of the world, so we need to heat up a lot of housing in the winter. And many people don't realize that 70% of that heat is recycled. So we're not even taking pristine resources, we're actually taking what's there and just moving it to our households. So that's a major energy efficiency input then. That said, we are now going into a gigantic transition towards electrification. So we are going to be increasing our use of electricity, both replacing other forms of energy, but also adding. I mean, we look at digitalization, and not to say TikTok is drawing a lot of energy, but I mean, we're really using a lot of more computer power, and that's going to use a lot of electricity, but we're also making batteries and cars and whatnot. So we're not going to decrease our use of energy in the near term. We're actually going to increase it quite drastically. So what does that mean? That means that we all need to get pretty wise as to how we use our energy, because the way we use energy is going to change. And for example, electricity, which we've now more or less taken for granted, you just put it on anytime, you use as much as you want. That's probably going to change. We'll need to adapt to the availability of renewable resources like wind and solar, but also maybe have to let the company, like let the factories work, and maybe we can hold back, and then we like try and use what's available as wise as possibly. I guess from my side, something that most energy companies and the energy world is working towards.
Nice question, nice answer. Thank you. I'm going to jump to Eleanor. Eleanor, do you have a question for anyone here?
Yes, I'm going to make something really advanced. I have a question for 3 of you. So let's try this. Okay, but David and Tilda, you guys have been creating your own company and are leading companies. And then I am wondering what it is, because all your companies are big. You have created something. What is it like to look back and say, wow, I have actually been a part of making this? What is that feeling like? Yeah, anyone can start.
Yeah, I can start. I think about that a lot. It's absolutely amazing. It's sort of, I don't know, incredible, unbelievable, and amazing. But there's also this sort of, like, I am now with my company in a place that was sort of what I planned for, but didn't dare to imagine would actually happen. But still, I'm at the very beginning of what we are planning to do. So it's like every day is today, very much. And a lot of it is very similar all the time. But still, when like there are lots of people working on it and it's growing and growing, and it's extremely rewarding. I can encourage anyone who want to do it, but sort of make sure that it's your passion before you start, because it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. Great answer. What about you?
Even though I'm still in the start of the company, I agree with you. It's a lot of work, but it's just getting more and more every time. Like every day that goes is just more to do, and I find that very, very fun. And if you work with something you really love, which you have the ability to do, if you make something on your own, you always have the ability to change the idea that you're working with. If you come up with something new, you can go in that direction. And that's really fun, because if you are tired of the things you're doing, then you can just make something new. Or if you really love what you're doing, you can just build onto that. So I also think it's really rewarding to work with and see the change that's happening. Especially now for me in the beginning, even though I've only run Cutlery for 1 year as a limited company, I still see a lot of difference from when I began, both with the company and the customers, that we've expanded a lot, but also with me being more comfortable in running a company by my own.
Great. Fun to see and kind of be excited of what's next.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
David?
Yeah, I think for a long time, when I saw somebody with a pair of ice bags, I thought that there was somebody I knew. But, you know, now we make a few 100,000 pairs. I kind of realized that that's not the case anymore. So it's a big, like a development process for myself, which is very exciting. And I think where we are at right now is how we can use our platform to do other things than just making shoes and selling them. But also to see what has been tremendous this past year through the COVID situation and so on, has been to see the development of the people in the organization and how the teams resume more responsibility, they drive, you know, so basically I don't need to do much work anymore.
Nice. We're going to take one more question from David. Do you have a burning question for someone on this panel?
I do actually. I have a question for you, which is relating to this psychology of your sort of values and being around people to make you actually do that, and also then influencing the world, being an activist. Because if you're surrounded by people who don't really share your values, so it's hard for you to sort of act on them, and you're moving to a group that share your values, you move from sort of being sort of a messenger, as it were, into sort of preaching for the choir. And that may sort of in this sort of small sphere of your own life make the world a slightly better place, because you're sort of consuming less or whatever it is, right? But the question is, if we don't sort of create silos by doing that, and actually the distance for the people who don't share your values to understand what it's about sort of increases.
So what's the question? Or
The question is, does that, like, what is the consequence of that ultimately? Like, do you see that you actually create, I don't know, like, this little hub, does that spread the values more strongly, or is it like, at least I feel good about myself now, but sort of the world becomes a worse place?
Well, it's definitely important to build bridges, and I think a lot about how can we decrease this polarization between different silos, as you were saying. So, and I think one way to do so is listen to the, what should we call them? The other group, or the, what do you want to call them?
The group not sharing your values, I guess?
Yeah. Listening to them. And I think you will notice that there are more similarities than you think. And talking about, or thinking about sustainability, you can actually, so for example, I think you can talk about sustainability from many different value system. So for a liberal person, for example, justice between social groups and states might be a very important value, and that drives their efforts for sustainability. For a conservative, authority, purity might be more important, but those values can also lead to engagement in sustainability, but more from a like conserve the nature kind of view, maybe. So I think it's possible to build bridges, but we have to listen more to each other rather than talking to others, actually.
Listening is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important for building community, and even listening to yourself as well, to be able to determine those values that we talked about. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we had a really, really great conversation, and I'm really pleased that we had such a relevant and timely conversation on such an important stage that allows this conversation, allows these ideas to spread. So we've come to the end of EnterVironment, the TEDx Gothenburg Salon event. So please, if you aren't already following us, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. Follow us, we're on Facebook. And be part of the community, this community of shared values. Thank you very much for your time spent with us, and thank you to the panel. I think you guys deserve a little hand. And stay with us, and we'll build this community of shared values together. So have a good night.